Wanted to talk to you about a couple of things outside of sports, Mike. I wanted to talk to you about Chapelle and what was happening at Saturday Night Live over the course of this weekend. I read reports, but I don't know what was true and what wasn't, that writers were either prepared to boycott or thinking about boycotting. Just the idea that Chapelle would be the guy allowed that stage after the midterms. What were your thoughts on on everything that happened there? As a former Saturday Night Live writer.
Yeah, I have no inside information at all about what went on. I would imagine that's true, that a number of people who work on the show, probably not just writers, were considering doing something. That happens every once in a while. Andrew Dice Clay very famously hosted the show long before I got there, and Nora Dunn protested and quit the show, actually, because of it. So there's precedent for people who work on the show protesting in different ways internally when hosts who are controversial come to host the show. It's tricky, right? Because SNL has made its bones on being relevant. You have to get people to host who are in the news, who are relevant, who are controversial. Like, that's how that show stays on the air for 50 years. So it's very likely that happened. I hadn't seen his monologue until last night. I watched it last night because enough people had asked me if I'd seen it. Pretty skilled performance in terms of like walking right up to the line and like putting one foot over the edge and then kind of coyly pulling it back with his material about Jewish people in the media. I mean, he's incredibly funny. He's always been incredibly funny. He's arguably the greatest stand-up of this generation, I would say. I question whether... I get that he wanted to do that material because of Kanye and Kyrie. It is the thing that's happening right now. I just don't know why at this moment you throw a little more gasoline on that fire, on the fire of dissent or dissension in the ranks between the black community and the Jewish community. I don't know, man. I feel like now is not the time a little bit. And I get that now is the time because Kyrie and Kanye are in the news. But I don't know, man. There's something about that specific subject that would make me think, like, if I talk about Kanye and Kyrie, I'm not going to also do just jokes about Jewish people running the media. That would be my preference.
Well, let me ask you this question, though, because as someone, you know that the stand-up comics are doing the bravest thing, the hardest thing in entertainment, and you know how this guy is regarded even historically. He is surgically skilled at the doing of this, and I'm guessing that if he were standing here, what he would say is some combination of, I'm not anti anything. I'm pro comedy. I'm fighting for comedians and their right to be able to tell all the jokes in all the spaces, even if it's too close to stereotypes and tropes and hatred and everything else. I'm guessing that he would argue on behalf of pro comedy, and he would say my perspective is the black perspective. I am speaking first and foremost as a black man in this country. Some combination thereof is how he would try to defend it.
Yes, that's correct. He said in his monologue, shouldn't be this hard to talk. And that's a very good position and that's a position that if you take, it's hard to take a different one, right? Like, yes, we all love free speech. It shouldn't be this hard to talk, blah, blah, blah. I've said this before, I'll say it again. No one is taking away his right to free speech. No one's ever tried. He has one of the highest paid comedians in the world. He has a deal with Netflix where he can basically do whatever he wants. He was saying what he was saying from the main stage at Saturday Night Live, a very famous comedy program. He tours whenever he wants. He does specials whenever he wants. It's a little disingenuous for him to talk about how hard it is to talk when he can talk in front of an enormous crowd every single time he wants to at the drop of a hat and get paid millions of dollars to do so. I will also say, as I've said before, that stand-up comedians have this thing where they complain about you can't say anything anymore. You can't talk anymore. You can't say this anymore. You can't say that anymore. The problem is the stand-up comedians have had essentially a one-way relationship with their audiences for all of human history. They get on a stage, they talk into a microphone, people laugh or don't laugh. What hasn't happened traditionally is that people have raised their hands in different ways and said, hey, that thing you said on stage just now sucks, I don't like it, and I don't think you should say it anymore. That's the new wrinkle in all of this. That's what's been happening to Chapelle in his jokes about the trans community. It's what's been happening to a bunch of people with different subjects that they've decided to talk about, misogyny and racism and everything else, and they don't like it. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for them not liking it because, as I have pointed out before, freedom of speech means you get to say whatever you want, and I get to stand up and say, hey, that sucks, I don't like it, I think that's racist, or I think that's transphobic, or I think it's whatever I think. That's the part of this that the stand-ups are objecting to, and I have no sympathy for you. You don't. Freedom of speech doesn't mean you get to say whatever you want, and I have to sit here and take it, and I have to sit here and enjoy it and like it and not comment on it. Like, that's insane. That's not what freedom of speech is. It never has been. And so I don't have a lot of sympathy for him saying from the main monologue stage at Saturday Night Live, the most famous comedy program of all time, man, it's really hard to say things these days, isn't it?
But Mike,
sorry, I don't buy it.
Isn't that part of the bit? Like, I feel like sometimes we watch stand-up say things on stage and think this is his actual heartfelt, he's pouring out his inner monologue, what he actually feels. And maybe there's a kernel of that's in there, but I'm watching and I'm like, that's the joke. That's part of the content, is complaining about, oh, I can't say anything anymore. He's not complaining to us. He's making a joke about it.
No, he's not. No, I'm sorry. I think that's a plea for sympathy. It's a plea for people to stop challenging him on what he says about the trans community specifically. And by the way, what he has said about the trans community is straight hot garbage. Like, there's nothing about what he said about trans people that has any merit or social value at all, other than let's push the envelope and see where the line is and blah, 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 whatever, all that crap. So I don't think he's doing a bit where he's like, man, it's so hard to speak these days. Ha ha, check out where I am and what I'm doing. Well, I think that is a straight up plea for people to stop, or a strategy for people to stop attacking him. I really do. I could be wrong.
I think I'm not saying it doesn't come from a genuine place. I'm saying what he did there was he made comedy out of something that came from a genuine place. And so we can debate what his actual feelings are separate from saying that was really funny, right? Not the whole thing. Obviously, the whole thing was very funny, but even specifically him complaining about what you can and can't say. He opens it by coming out saying, I'd like to just say I stand against anti-Semitism.
He read a statement saying I denounce anti-Semitism in all its forms, and then went to some of the tropes.
Hold on, Dan. Mm-hmm. He said that, and then he says, "See, Kanye, that's how you do it." Mm-hmm. That's the joke. That's the joke. He's not actually reading a statement.
I mean, what I was watching was the most skilled comedian I've ever seen saying to all his comedian brethren, watch this, okay? Watch what I'm going to do on this stage, and my skill will carry me. And I'm in awe of it. I am in awe because I've never seen an orator like this who can do this and has the history that he has to get here, where he fought Hollywood and has got a different story than everyone else, and you can't cancel him because he got too strong. And he got it on the back of laughs, and he got it at a different time. And now there are a whole lot of people saying you're not funny anymore. You're not funny. and he's pushing the line on and he's doing it on behalf of comedy. But Mike, I ask you this, how do you separate those two things? Because you have seen, that it's such a small world, these sculptors who are stand-up comics. So you're sitting there and you're watching and you're like, is this necessary? Do you really need to be on a razor's edge with this and put your toe over and go ahead and welcome the Anti-Defamation League and all of its complications? Are you willingly going into that buzzsaw? Is it necessary? What if his answer is yes?
Then his answer is yes. I don't know. I mean, look, no one's trying to take away his right to say whatever he wants and to make the jokes he wants. Like, go crazy, man. He's done it for 25 years, 30 years. He's done it incredibly well. He's a genius. He's one of the funniest dudes ever. And the way that he's gotten there partially is by doing exactly what he did, which is like poking around, prodding, finding out where the line is, pushing the line. As Amin Al-Hassan once said, the line is where we feel alive. So that's what he has done, right? And so keep doing it. I'm not, no one's trying to stop him from doing it. What I object to only is that when he does that and people stand up and go like, hey man, that was a little iffy, or I don't think you should be saying that, or I disagree with you or whatever, then he's a wounded bird. A lot of stand-ups are suddenly wounded birds, and they're like, whoa, it's so hard to talk these days. Oh man, everything is cancel culture, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's the part of it I object to. I don't object to the joke telling. Tell any joke you want. Just don't complain when people stand up and say that they don't like the jokes you're telling, or that they think they're anti-Semitic or racist or homophobic or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, again, and this is what Dan is talking about, the skill of Chappelle is, I think there are a lot of stand-ups who try to do that, complain as part of their act, and they just sound whiny. And when Chappelle does it, he does it in a way that I find to be hilarious, even as I don't agree that he's persecuted. I don't think that. But also part of that ethos comes from a time when he was kind of on the outs. You mentioned it. He was out of it. He's like, this is someone who's saying, I walked into the pit of the volcano. I've seen it. I've lived it. So you can't tell me what it is or isn't about. When I've done it, I've seen when I took the path less traveled, and rather than people just say, well, Chappelle, decided out, people made up a million different wild ass reasons and rumors to figure out what he was doing. And when you come back from something like that and come back 100 times stronger, 100 times richer, 100 times more powerful,
I'm awed by it. I'm
no
legitimately awed that he can make Netflix bow, that he could get the name of his show back, that he could beat Hollywood, and that's the resume he's taking up there. But I'm with Mike on, like, really? Jews run Hollywood is the best you can do at the top of your craft?
I love that you said that, because the joke was, you get a group of black people, it's a gang.
It was a funny joke.
It's a group of Italians. It's a mob. You get a group of Jewish people, and it's
a conspiracy, and we can't talk about it.
It's a coincidence, and we shouldn't talk about it, right? So the implication when people say, "Oh, that's an anti-Semitic joke," is that, yeah, also groups of black people are gangs, and groups of Italians are the mob. All three of those things are examples of stereotypes that people barter on.
Yep.
That aren't true. But the only part that people found to be offensive was the part where referring to the Jewish community. That, to me, is the genius, is to make you jump up and say, I object to that joke.
It's a good joke.
And I object to that joke because of that line, that punchline right there. But I don't object to the setup.
Yeah,
what's the lion
it's
stat,
a good
Mike?
joke. It's a good joke. Nazis didn't march in Charlottesville and threaten violence against
I asked
Italian
for lions,
people.
not Nazis.
You know what I mean? Like that. The objection that people have is like, right now at this moment is a very dangerous time. There are active threats against synagogues across America.
Absolutely.
There are no active threats against groups of Italian people.
Are there any active threats against groups of black people? Because I kind of feel like 400 plus years of that has been happening. And I think that's a lot of, again, the kernel of where a lot of this stand-up is coming from for Chappelle. It's like, even when you talk about his jokes around the trans community, it's the idea that in this country, people will be up in arms about all sorts of worthy causes about prejudices other than black people. Like, well, black people, that's just the way it is.
But this
there are threats on synagogues. Absolutely. There's also a threat every time there's a cop behind me, Mike.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
this is the problem, man. This is honestly the problem with this whole thing, right? You know what a white supremacist's wet dream is? Black community and Jewish community fighting each other.
Sure.
And so when Kyrie or Kanye or anyone dredges up these old anti-Semitic tropes and puts them out there, and then we have this debate. What is happening now is we're talking about who has it worse,
sure,
the Jews or the blacks.
We're doing
when meanwhile the same neo-Nazi assholes who are marching in Charlottesville and are right now all coming back to Twitter because their hero is now running Twitter. They hate everybody. They hate all these people. And so that my objection to what Chappelle did is like it's not, don't make jokes about any group of people you want to make jokes about. Go ahead, man. It's your microphone. You have the
can you help me? Can you help me with the bridge? Can you help me with the bridge, though? Can you help me here, Mike? Because you are someone who will. You made your life in comedy. You appreciate all of this stuff. And you're saying this particular time that we're on in America, do you have to do the insincere to lead off your bit? We denounce anti-Semitism in all its forms. And then do you need
disclaimer?
To, at this time, do you need to go there? His argument would be, yes, I do. On behalf of comedy, on behalf of who I am. Do I want to be remembered like Pryor? Do I want to be a leader for all of these people in this industry, as I have been? That's what his argument would be.
We've all heard that argument. I've heard that argument many times. I don't particularly buy that argument in every instance. I sometimes would say, hey, if you make jokes about the trans community, for example, which he has done and then gotten very angry when people got angry at him for doing so, it's like his at some weird level, what he's saying is, Black people in this country, this is the original sin of America, even though I suppose you could say Native Americans was the original sin. But Black people, African immigrants, the original sin, brought here against their will, enslaved. And I won't stand for any group of people being treated like more of victims or more absorb more pain than we have. That's his argument. My argument would be like, well, that doesn't mean, even if you believe that, that doesn't mean there aren't dozens and dozens and dozens of groups of people who have experienced enormous amounts of pain and maybe at this exact moment are actually experiencing more intense pain. And so why punch down at them? Why? What's the point of pitting individual groups of people against each other? That doesn't make any sense to me. I understand that his argument, a lot of stand-ups argument, a lot of comedians' argument is, like that this art form depends on pushing the envelope every single opportunity, every single place we can, testing those boundaries, blah, blah, blah. If you stop me from doing that, then we're not really free people, whatever. All I'm saying is, like, from time to time, you might look around and say, hey, it doesn't make any sense to punch down at a different group of people who are also experiencing pain. I just don't see the value of that. I never have, and I never will. And so he can say whatever he wants, and I get to say, I don't think he should say that because I think that sucks. I think that's a crummy point to make, especially at this exact moment in American history. It's a stalemate. It's just a stalemate. Like, we'll never resolve this. Like, he thinks what he thinks. I and other people can think what we think. And then what we're left with is hopefully a situation where we all punch up. Like, that's the thing that I want him to do, is punch up. He's the best in the world at punching. Punch up at the Nazis who are marching in Charlottesville or something. Like, those are punch up at Trump. Well, whatever. I don't want to get into this. I have to take my kids to school.
You're 20 minutes into it.
We're not going to get the lion stat? We're not going to get the lion stat?
All I wanted. Jesus.